The CEO invited me to lunch only to tell me that the company was going in a different direction, and after building the tech division from nothing, I was being replaced by the owner's nephew. These things happen, I replied with a calm smile, but no one at that table realized that I had already seen it coming for months. My name is Derek. I am 42 years old, and for 11 years I have been the backbone of River Manufacturing's IT infrastructure, though you would never know it from our company website or the quarterly reports. I built our network security from scratch back when we were still clinging to Windows XP and storing passwords on sticky notes. I grew a 5-person help desk into a 30-person operation that kept 3 production facilities running around the clock. The machines never stopped in Milwaukee, and neither did I. Ironically, I was never supposed to be there that long. I had taken a job as a stopgap after my divorce, just something to keep me occupied while I figure out the rest of my life. But I turned out to be good at it, better than good. And over time, those servers, those blinking lights, those humming networks became mine, not legally, but in every way that mattered to me. The lunch was at Maxwell's, the kind of restaurant with white tablecloths and polished silverware, where executives woo clients they want to impress. It was not the sort of place you expect to be dismissed from your life's work. But Preston Campbell, our CEO, had always been obsessed with appearances. "Derek, you have been invaluable," he said while cutting into a steak, "but we need fresh perspectives, someone with vision for where technology is heading." I heard the translation immediately. We found someone cheaper, someone who will not challenge the board when they make bad decisions. Harrison's nephew had just finished a master's at MIT, specializing in digital transformation. Brilliant kid, Preston called him. I nodded, took a sip of water, and asked evenly, who is handling the transition? Preston's shoulders dropped a little with relief that I was not making a scene. "You will have 6 weeks," he said, "and we will announce it after the quarterly all hands." I signed NDA. He slid across the table before dessert, smiled, shook his hand, and told him I understood that business decisions had to be made. But when I returned to my desk, I saw my admin credentials had already been downgraded, my name removed from the leadership team's email chain. The decision had been made long before lunch, probably weeks earlier. That night I could not sleep, not out of fear of finding another job, though the uncertainty gnawed at me, and not even out of pure anger, though there was plenty of that. What kept me awake was a memory of what I had noticed in the server logs 3 months earlier, small unauthorized access attempts from an IP address tied to the executive floor, someone digging into systems they should not even know existed, poring over my documentation, my security protocols, my contingency plans. They were not only replacing me, they were stripping me bare, mining my knowledge before discarding me. I had moved to Milwaukee 16 years ago, following Ellie after we married, leaving behind a decent security job in Minneapolis because she had been accepted to graduate school here. We were young, ambitious, ready to build a future together. I thought I would find something steady, and I did. But the divorce blindsided me after 7 years. No fights, no gradual unraveling, just papers waiting on the kitchen counter one evening with her saying, "We want different things." When Riverton hired me, I was sleeping on my brother's couch, and the company had just suffered a ransomware attack that nearly crippled operations. They needed someone to patch up the mess, and I was supposed to be temporary. But when I looked at their systems, I saw potential. These manufacturing men knew machines, but computers were another world. Their multi-million-dollar operations, hundreds of jobs, entire production lines, were balanced on crumbling infrastructure, one crash away from catastrophe. I pitched Preston a 5-year overhaul plan, and to his credit, he gave me the budget. For 3 years, I practically lived in server rooms, rebuilding every line, every node, training staff, creating backups and fail-safes. When the Northeast blackout hit, we were the only facility in the region that stayed online, and suddenly the board noticed. My budget tripled, my team grew, and I recruited brilliant minds like Vanessa, who became my right hand, and Luis, who could code his way out of anything. Together, we transformed Riverton into a company that could promise clients they would never miss a deadline. Harrison Wells, the majority owner, even shook my hand at the 2019 Christmas party, telling me, "You turned us into a modern operation. We could not have expanded without your systems." I thought I had finally found my place, somewhere I mattered, But the cracks began to show last September when a consultant appeared unannounced to audit my systems, asking basic questions about tools I had designed myself. When I pressed him on who authorized it, he vaguely cited the executive team. Then my access to board meeting minutes quietly disappeared with the note, server cleanup. Preston canceled our weekly briefings more and more often, always with an excuse. At the New Year retreat, I overheard Harrison boasting about his nephew, Silicon Valley companies fighting over him, brilliant with computers. I brushed it off. I should not have. Then Vanessa confided that she had been invited to a strategy session I should have led, and when she brought up my absence, Preston changed the subject. Something feels off, she whispered. It was clear they were planning around me. 2 nights after that lunch, I stood in the server room at 7 in the evening, long after most had gone home. The quiet hum of machinery was like a heartbeat, steady, calming. I had chosen every rack, every cooling unit, every redundancy. 11 years of my life pulsed inside those blinking lights. My sanctuary. I was running my hand along the console when Nathan Blake, Harrison's nephew, appeared in the doorway. Clean-cut, expensive watch, confidence dripping off him like cologne. He could not have been more than 30. Just routine checks. I said evenly, "You need something?" Getting the lay of the land, he replied, stepping inside as if he already owned it. "Preston said you would be showing me around soon." "Did he?" I asked. Nathan studied the servers. "Impressive setup," he remarked. "A bit old school, but solid. Old school. I had upgraded those systems 8 months earlier." He smirked slightly. "Your documentation is thorough," he said. "I have some ideas for modernization, as if doing me a favor. Looking forward to hearing them," I said, though the words tasted bitter. After he left, I opened the access logs. Nathan's credentials had been created 3 weeks before my lunch with Preston, granting him top-level access. He had already combed through every one of my documents. I texted Luis. "Coffee tomorrow. Joe's. 6:30. That night, I drove to the lakefront, parking in the spot where Ellie and I once watched sunsets. The water stretched black under the winter sky. I remembered the day Preston promoted me, calling me the backbone of Riverton. Turns out backbones can be replaced. Luis was already waiting at the cafe the next morning, dark circles under his eyes. He knew something was wrong. "They are phasing me out," I said flatly. He nodded. "I figured. They have been asking me weird questions, having me explain your systems." "When?" I asked. "A couple weeks now," he admitted, eyes down. "I am sorry, man. I should have told you." I shook my head. I did not blame him. Luis had kids, a mortgage, responsibilities. "What is your plan?" he asked, and suddenly I realized I had one. Watching commuters rush past a window, I felt a clarity I had not felt since Ellie left. "They think everything is in the documentation," I said quietly, "but we both know it is not." Luis leaned in. "The proprietary tools, the hidden workarounds." I nodded. "The patches I built off the books, the monitoring system, the custom interface." "Derek," he said cautiously, "you are not planning to sabotage them?" "No, but I am not giving away what is mine either." Luis studied me for a long moment, then nodded. He understood. "I need copies of everything I developed personally," I said, "and I need to know who is still loyal." The official announcement came during the all-hands meeting the following week, with Preston standing stiffly at the podium and talking in that polished, rehearsed tone about exciting transitions and fresh perspectives, his voice echoing to the auditorium like a speech meant more for investors and employees, while Nathan stood beside him, wearing a polite, composed smile that never quite reached his eyes, nodding at the appropriate moments, as though rehearsed in front of a mirror. "Derek has been instrumental in building our IT infrastructure," Preston said, without once looking directly at me. "And we are grateful for his contributions as he helps us transition to Nathan's leadership over the next 6 weeks." A low wave of murmurs rippled through the room as confusion spread across the faces of my colleagues, many of whom had worked late nights and weekends beside me for years, and their shock cut deeper than Preston's words, because it was a reminder of how little control I had over my own legacy. Vanessa's eyes found mine across the rows of chairs, searching, silently asking a question she did not dare speak aloud. and I gave her the smallest nod I could manage, a silent assurance that I was not about to break down in front of everyone. After the meeting ended, while most of my team lingered in uneasy clusters whispering among themselves, I requested a sit-down with Preston and HR, determined to address what I knew they were trying to quietly bury. In that bland conference room, with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, I calmly pointed out that several of the systems Nathan was about to inherit had been built by me outside normal work hours using my own development framework. Diane from HR, her expression carefully neutral, slid a document across the table and reminded me that the employment contract was clear. Anything developed during my tenure was company property. Not everything, I countered. My voice steadied though my pulse pounded in my ears, because the system's sync interface had been developed before I even joined Riverton. I licensed it to the company but retained ownership, and it was spelled out explicitly in the original agreement. Preston shifted in his chair, visibly uncomfortable, as if I had brought up something he had hoped time would erase. That was 10 years ago. Derek, he said, his tone dismissive. The company has evolved. So as systems sync, I pressed, leaning forward across the table, reminding them that every update and integration had been built on my original code, and I was not asking for the impossible, just proper compensation for what was rightfully mine. Preston and Diane exchanged a quick, silent glance before Preston finally muttered that they would look into it. But in the meantime, I should focus on transition with Nathan. I knew that look. They were stalling, hoping I would back down. The next morning, as if to confirm my suspicions, my access to the development servers was restricted, and an automated email citing security protocols during transition periods landed in my inbox like a slap in the face. Later that day, Nathan held a team meeting without inviting me, and when I showed up anyway, leaning casually against the doorframe, his annoyance flickered across his face before he smoothed it into a practiced smile. "Derek, glad you could join us," he said, pretending warmth. I was just outlining some changes to the network architecture. "Interesting," I said, my tone sharper than I intended. "Which architecture specifically?" "The main production floor systems." He answered confidently. "We are going to streamline the protocols." My jaw tightened as I replied evenly that those protocols were not arbitrary, but custom-designed safeguards against catastrophic machine failures under peak load. Nathan's smile grew thinner, the mask slipping just slightly as he countered that modern systems did not require such complex workarounds. "They are not workarounds," Vanessa cut in firmly, her voice steady as she looked directly at him. "They are necessary adaptations for our hardware, designed by Derek after the 2018 failure." The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air, and for a brief moment Nathan's confidence wavered before he recovered with a dismissive nod. "Well, I appreciate the historical perspective," he said curtly, "but we are moving forward with the streamlining," and he turned to the whiteboard, effectively shutting me out of my own creation. Later that afternoon, I received an email from Legal, Cold, and Impersonal, asserting the company's ownership of all systems, including System Sync, citing some buried clause about integrated technologies becoming company property. Attached was an insulting offer, a technology acquisition bonus of $5,000. The betrayal deepened the next day when I discovered Nathan had scheduled one-on-one meetings with each of my team members, not transition updates, but full job evaluations, carefully assessing who to keep and who to cut. Luis texted me afterward, telling me Nathan had asked if my systems were truly necessary or just deliberately overcomplicated, fishing for criticism, trying to undermine me through my own people. That evening, as if fate was twisting the knife, I found an email in my personal account from one of our suppliers, confused about a new licensing agreement Riverton had sent them, one I knew nothing about. When I pulled up the document, my chest tightened. Preston had signed a deal transferring all my custom supplier integrations to a third-party vendor, a startup conveniently run by Nathan's former classmate. It was no longer just about replacing me. They were dismantling everything I had built piece by piece and selling it off. When I tried to log into the backup servers to retrieve my original code, I found my credentials revoked entirely. Game on, I thought grimly. They had underestimated me. I needed leverage, and I needed it quickly. Riverton had not been careless. They had been calculated, methodical, and the timeline was beginning to reveal itself. Nathan had been studying my systems for months, quietly preparing to replace me while extracting every piece of knowledge I had to offer. That night, restless and burning with equal parts anger and resolve. I reached out to Darren Phillips, a network security specialist I had worked with years earlier, one of the few people I trusted. We met at a rundown diner off the highway, the kind of place executives like Preston would never be caught dead in, its cracked vinyl booths and flickering neon sign offering a strange kind of safety. Legally, you are in a tough spot, Darren said after listening carefully to my story, stirring his coffee slowly, but something does not add up. Why push you out now when the company is thriving? That's what I cannot figure out. I admitted, my voice heavy with frustration. Let me dig around, Darren offered, just some information gathering, nothing intrusive. 2 nights later, my phone rang at 11 p.m. Darren's voice was urgent. You need to see this. He had uncovered SEC filings showing Riverton was preparing for acquisition. TechCore Industries, a massive manufacturing conglomerate out of Boston, was in late-stage talks to buy them out. The deal, Darren explained, hinged on Riverton demonstrating modernized technical infrastructure and transitional leadership, and suddenly the pieces fell into place. They were cleaning house, streamlining everything to make the sale look better, and my systems were a cornerstone of their valuation. The document specifically highlighted the proprietary manufacturing management interface, System Sync. My System Sync. But Darren had uncovered more. Harrison Wells had cashed out most of his shares last quarter, securing his profits, while Preston and the rest of the executive team stood to gain golden parachutes and cushy positions at TechCore. The piece that shattered me was not the acquisition itself, but the emails Darren forwarded, revealing Preston and Harrison had been discussing my replacement for over 6 months, even as I was pulling all-nighters to fix a critical security breach that could have crippled the company. While I was saving them, they were interviewing Nathan. That night, I drove aimlessly until I ended up at the old industrial park where years ago I had first sketched the architecture for System Sync on a notepad when it was nothing more than an ambitious dream. I sat in my car until dawn, watching the sky shift from black to gray over the skeletons of abandoned warehouses, my chest aching with a mix of fury and clarity. When I finally returned home, I went straight to the back of my closet, dug out an old external hard drive, and plugged it in. There was the original System Sync code, untouched, predating Riverton, alongside the documentation proving I had started development 8 months before ever joining the company. And buried within my old emails, I found exactly what I needed, a message from Preston himself, specifically requesting that I integrate System Sync with Riverton's infrastructure, an acknowledgement in black and white that was my proprietary tool from the very beginning. His promise had always been that we would formalize ownership once things settled down, and like a fool, I trusted him. The very next day, Nathan called me into a meeting with Preston and Diane from HR. Preston's words came sharp and rehearsed. We're accelerating the transition. Your last day will be next Friday. I blinked, registering that 6 weeks had just been cut to 2. Any particular reason? I asked, my voice calm but edged with disbelief. Diane leaned forward, her tone polished and clinical. Nathan has demonstrated exceptional capability, and frankly, Derek, your attitude has not been conducive to a smooth handover. I nodded slowly, swallowing the bitter taste rising in my throat. I see. Nathan chimed in without hesitation. We'll need you to complete all documentation and training by Wednesday. I kept my tone steady. Of course. And the ownership of System Sync? Have you had time to review the original agreements? Preston's face hardened, his words clipped. Our legal team has determined that all integrated systems fall under company ownership. The separation package is generous, Derek. I suggest you take it. I rose from my chair, forcing a thin smile. I'll have my lawyer review everything. Preston's eyes narrowed. Don't make this difficult. It won't change the outcome. As I walked out, fury buzzing my veins, I texted Luis. Plan B tonight. 7 hours later, Luis and I stood in the dim glow of a grocery store parking lot. He handed me a flash drive with hands that trembled slightly in the cold night air. Everything you asked for: original code bases, deployment logs, authentication keys. I studied him, the harsh fluorescent lights above making him look older than his years. Why are you helping me? I asked quietly. He met my gaze with quiet fire. Because they think we're all replaceable. His words lodged deep. I thanked him, slipping the drive into my jacket. That weekend, while the city outside kept moving, I shut myself in my apartment, surrounded by scattered papers, glowing monitors, and empty coffee cups. I meticulously organized every piece of evidence. The original system sync code, emails from Preston that betrayed their intentions, licensing agreements signed years ago, and timestamps proving that I had built the technology long before Riverton existed. Each file I saved felt like reclaiming a piece of myself they had tried to erase. Monday morning, I arrived early, the office still quiet, only to find Vanessa already at her desk. She looked tired, her eyes rimmed red. You heard about the accelerated timeline? She asked. I nodded. How's the team handling it? Her lips tightened. Not well. Nathan forced emergency planning sessions all weekend. Tried to reverse engineer your monitoring system. She lowered her voice. It didn't go well. 3 alerts from the production floor were missed. My heart skipped. Anyone hurt? She shook her head. No, but they had to shut down line 3 for 4 hours. Cost about $40,000 and lost production. I masked my reaction with practiced neutrality. Sorry to hear that. She hesitated, chewing her lip. Derek, I think I'm next. Nathan keeps asking if my role is necessary. I had suspected as much. Vanessa knew too much about how things really worked, and that made her dangerous to them. Do you trust me? I asked softly. Her answer came without hesitation. Completely. I slid a sealed envelope across her desk, my fingers brushing hers briefly. If anything unusual happens this week, open this. It explains everything. She nodded, though fear lingered in her eyes. That afternoon, I sat across from 3 separate patent attorneys, paying rush fees to file provisional patents on the most critical components of System Sync. Not the whole system, but the beating heart of it, the features that made it indispensable to manufacturing equipment. Tuesday, I played the role of model employee, finishing transition documentation, attending Nathan's meetings, answering questions with measured politeness. Meanwhile, Darren, a trusted friend, helped me set up a secure off-site server. By midnight, my original code had been transferred, safe and beyond Riverton's reach. I created a standalone version of System Sync, one that would live independently of their infrastructure. Wednesday morning brought a quiet surprise. In my personal inbox, an email from TechCore Industries waited. We'd like to discuss mutual business interests. They had heard of my departure and smelled opportunity. I forwarded the message to my lawyer and placed a call to their VP of operations. We agreed to meet once my exit was finalized. That night, under the glow of a single desk lamp, I executed the most critical part of my plan. With the credentials Louise had preserved, I updated System Sync with digital signature verification, making sure no unauthorized code could alter it. Then, I adjusted the license to expire in exactly 8 days, the day after my official departure. It was not sabotage, it was preservation. The system would keep running if they signed a proper agreement. Nothing destructive, nothing malicious, just protecting what was mine. Thursday, Nathan summoned me to his office. His eyes studied me like a predator, unsure if its prey was dangerous. Some of the team says you've been acting strangely, he said. Anything I should know about? I smiled faintly. Just focus on wrapping things up. He leaned forward. We're changing all system passwords tomorrow after you leave. Standard procedure. Makes sense, I replied, though it won't affect System Sync. The beauty of the design is that it runs regardless of admin changes. His brow furrowed, uncertain if I was warning him or simply stating fact. He chose to dismiss me. Legal will meet you tomorrow for final paperwork. As I walked out, Preston passed me in the hallway, barely acknowledging me. 11 years reduced to silence. That night, I sent one final message to my server. Verification sequence Alpha 7 complete. Countdown initiated. Friday, I turned in my badge, signed the paperwork, declined the hollow lunch Nathan had arranged. Preston's relief was obvious. As I reached my car, Louise called. It's done. Nathan changed all the passwords. They're doing a full review this afternoon. Thanks, I said evenly. What happens now? Now we wait. The weekend passed quietly, my phone buzzing with calls I ignored. For the first time in months, I slept deeply. Monday morning, 9:17 a.m., as the production floor hit peak load. Every instance of system sync across Riverton's facilities displayed the same message. License expired. Please contact the developer to renew. By 9:20, the first production line was down. By 9:45, all 3 facilities stood frozen. At 10:30, Preston called, his voice strained. What the hell did you do? I didn't do anything, I said calmly. The license expired. As a developer and owner of System Sync, I'm happy to discuss renewal terms. This is sabotage, he snapped. No, it's standard license management. I corrected. Check Clause 7 of the original agreement. Riverton was licensing the technology, not owning it. Silence hung heavy before I added. I've sent a new licensing agreement to legal. The terms are simple. Recognition of my ownership, fair compensation, and a non-disclosure agreement about my departure. His response came tight and bitter. That's extortion. No, I said firmly. That's business. By mid-afternoon, their lawyers confirmed the truth. By evening, the agreement was signed. 3 days later, I sat in TechCore's office, their VP sliding a contract toward me. We're still acquiring Riverton, he said, but we want you to lead technical integration as a consultant, not an employee. The salary was double, with freedom and control I had never known. What about Nathan? I asked. The VP's mouth tightened. Mr. Blake will be pursuing other opportunities. I signed. Weeks later, Luis told me Nathan had been quietly ousted, clients threatening to leave after repeated failures. Preston remained CEO in name, his role at TechCore hollow. No power, just a title. I did not feel the triumph I expected, only a calm certainty that I had reclaimed what was mine. A month later, I used my first consulting check to buy a modest lakeside cabin, a place where mornings smelled of pine and evenings glowed with sunsets across the water. Vanessa joined my consulting team soon after, then Luis, until half of my old department worked with me, not under me, partners, not subordinates. One evening, nearly a year later, I ran into Preston at a downtown restaurant. He looked older, the weight of failure etched into his features. He hesitated, then approached my table. You won, he said simply. I studied him. Creased eyes, a rumpled suit, a man diminished. It wasn't about winning, I replied softly. It was about value, knowing what you're worth. He nodded once, then walked away. I lingered there, watching the city lights shimmer across the river, reflecting on the systems we build, the ones we destroy, and the ones that endure long after us.